The scent of salt air and stale beer filled the harbor's edge, a worn-out bar where sailors and soldiers came to forget. Behind the scarred wooden counter, Emma Cole moved with practiced ease, pouring drinks as if she'd been doing it her whole life. Her auburn hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes had a warmth that made people feel comfortable. But if you looked closely, you'd see a sharpness there, a sign that she saw much more than she ever let on. For the past 5 weeks, Emma had been working here, all part of a mission. She was undercover, trying to infiltrate a weapons smuggling ring that operated through the San Diego docks. By day, she was just a friendly bartender, serving drinks and listening to stories. By night, she was a special operations soldier, reporting intelligence to her commanding officer about anything suspicious she saw or heard. No one in this rough-and-tumble bar knew that the woman pouring their beers had spent the last 8 years in military special operations, completing missions in 3 different countries that the public would never hear about. Tonight was a typical Friday. The place was packed, every table full, and the bar was lined 3 people deep. Emma weaved through the crowd, her mind working like a computer, cataloging faces and conversations while she smiled and made small talk. In a corner booth, she spotted her main target, a dock supervisor named Vincent Russo, who was rumored to have connections to illegal arms shipments. She knew she couldn't stare at him without blowing her cover, so she had to be careful. A group of Marines had taken over the center tables, their voices getting louder with each round of drinks. Emma had served them before. They were mostly young guys just letting off steam. But tonight, one of them was different. He'd been watching her with an intensity that set off all her internal alarms. His name was Corporal Derek Ahn. He sat with his back to the wall, his eyes following her every move. He was built like a tank, with short hair and a jaw that looked like it was cut from stone. While his friends were laughing and joking, Derek's expression was cold and calculating. Emma had noticed him watching her on 3 other nights, always silent, always observing. Another round for table 7, called out Tom, the other bartender on duty. Emma nodded, loading a tray with fresh bottles. As she walked toward the Marines' table, their loud chatter died down. Derek's eyes were locked on her face. "Here you go, gentlemen," Emma said, her voice cheerful as she handed out the drinks. "Just let me know if you need anything else." "Actually, there is something I need," Derek said. His voice had an edge that made his friends go quiet. "I need you to stop pretending." Emma's heart beat a little faster, but she kept her face a mask of pleasant confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Sure you don't," Derek said, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You've been here 5 weeks. You smile at everyone, remember all their drink orders, but you never really talk to anyone. You never go out. You watch everything like you're taking notes." The noise in the bar seemed to fade as people turned to look, sensing trouble. Emma carefully set down her empty tray, her mind racing. Her cover story was solid. A divorced woman from Nevada starting over. Nothing she'd done should have raised any flags. "I'm just trying to do my job and mind my own business," Emma said, her voice steady. "Maybe you should try doing the same." Derek stepped closer, getting right in her personal space. "See, that's what bothers me. A woman who looks like you, working in a place like this, and you turn down every guy who asks you out. What are you really doing here?" "Derek, man, leave her alone," one of his friends said, looking nervous. "You've had too much to drink." "Shut up, Phillips," Derek snapped, his eyes never leaving Emma. "I've been watching her. Something's off." Emma's training took over. She was already assessing the threat, planning her escape routes. Derek was drunk, but not sloppy drunk. His stance told her he had military combat training, probably from the Marine Corps' martial arts program. The other 4 Marines at his table were watching, a mix of concern and curiosity on their faces. "I think you should sit back down," Emma said, her voice dropping its friendly tone and becoming firm. "Finish your drinks and call it a night. Or what?" Derek's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was painfully tight. "You'll call the cops? File a complaint?" "I don't think so. I think you'll just take it." That touch triggered years of training. Her body moved on instinct. In one fluid motion, she twisted her wrist against the weak point of his grip, stepped into his space, and drove the palm of her hand hard into his solar plexus. Derek gasped for air and stumbled back, letting go of her wrist. His face turned red with a mix of rage and humiliation as his friends jumped to their feet. Emma stood her ground, perfectly balanced and ready, her face calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "You just made a big mistake," Derek growled, lunging for her again. This time, Emma didn't hold back. She caught his arm, used his own momentum against him, and applied a simple joint lock that forced him face down onto the table. Bottles shattered on the floor as he struggled, but Emma had the upper hand, thanks to her superior technique. "Touch me again, and it gets worse," she whispered close to his ear. "Your choice." The other Marines started to move forward, their loyalty to their friend taking over. Emma released Derek and stepped back, her eyes scanning all 5 of them, tracking every movement. The situation was escalating, and her cover was in jeopardy, but she refused to be a victim. Tom, the other bartender, had already picked up the phone to call the police, but Emma knew that could bring the wrong kind of attention. She had to de-escalate this fast, without revealing who she really was. Derek straightened up, rubbing his shoulder. The anger in his eyes was now mixed with something else. It looked like recognition, or at least a confirmed suspicion. "You're no bartender," he said. Those moves were military. Emma's mind was racing. The operation was compromised, but maybe she could still salvage it. "I served 4 years in the army," she said, sticking close to the truth. "I know how to handle myself. Now, are you leaving, or am I calling the MPs?" A cold smile spread across Derek's face. "Yeah, you're military. The question is, what are you really doing here?" Before Emma could answer, the bar's front door swung open. 3 men walked in, and their eyes immediately found Derek. They weren't in uniform, but they moved with a kind of disciplined purpose that screamed danger. All of Emma's internal alarms went off at once. Her night had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more stories like this. The 3 men who entered moved with the controlled precision of trained operatives, their eyes scanning the bar with a tactical awareness that made Emma's instincts flare. The leader, a lean man in his 40s with silver threading through his dark hair, locked eyes with Derek and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Emma recognized the silent communication, the kind of coordination that comes from working together in high-stakes situations. "Everything all right here, Derek?" the silver-haired man asked, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone who had spent years barking orders. His jacket hung just loose enough to conceal a weapon, and Emma caught the slight bulge at his hip. "Just having a conversation with our friendly bartender," Derek replied, his earlier aggression replaced with something more calculated. "Turns out she has some interesting skills." Emma's mind worked rapidly, processing the new threat. 5 Marines, 3 additional operatives, all potentially hostile. The other bar patrons had gone quiet, sensing the dangerous undercurrent. Tom stood frozen behind the bar, phone still in his hand. Emma needed to control this situation before it exploded and destroyed months of investigative work. "Gentlemen, I don't want any trouble," Emma said, keeping her voice steady. "Let me buy you all around, and we can forget this happened." The silver-haired man studied her with unsettling intensity. "You know what I think, Derek? I think our friend here is exactly what we've been worried about. The timing's too perfect. New bartender shows up right when we're moving product through the port. She's watching everyone, asking casual questions about shipping schedules and dock workers." Emma's blood ran cold. They hadn't just noticed her. They had been actively looking for surveillance. The operation was even more compromised than she had realized. Her handler, Colonel Patricia Dawson, had warned her that the trafficking network might have inside information, possibly even military intelligence contacts. This confirmed those fears. "You're paranoid," Emma said, forcing a nervous laugh that fit her cover identity. "I ask about shipping because half my customers work the docks. It's called making conversation." "Really?" Derek stepped closer, emboldened by the backup. "Then why did you take down a Marine Corps corporal with a textbook disarm and restraint technique? Bartending school teach you that?" One of Derek's friends, a younger Marine who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. "Derek, maybe we should just go. This is getting out of hand." "Shut up, rookie," Derek snapped. "You don't understand what's at stake here." The silver-haired man raised his hand, silencing everyone. "Here's what's going to happen. Emma, that is your name, right? You're going to come with us for a friendly chat. We're going to ask you some questions, and you're going to answer them honestly. Then, if we're satisfied, you can go back to your boring bartender life." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Emma said flatly. Her hand drifted toward the bar, where she had stashed her emergency backup weapon, a compact 9mm in a hidden compartment beneath the register. "That would be a mistake," the man said, pulling back his jacket to reveal not just a pistol, but a federal badge. "Special Agent Lawrence Chun, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. We've been running our own operation here, and you just walked right into the middle of it." Emma's world tilted. NCIS running a parallel investigation meant either a catastrophic lack of coordination or something more sinister. It could be a turf war between agencies, or worse, a compromised operation on one side or the other. Her counterintelligence training kicked in. Trust no one until verified. If you're really NCIS, then you know there are proper channels for this, Emma said. "We can sort this out through official procedures." "We don't have time for official procedures," Chun replied. "There's a shipment coming through tonight, and we need to know whose side you're on." Derek moved toward the bar, flanking her position. "She's reached for something. Probably armed." Emma made her decision in a split second. She couldn't let them search her and find the weapon, the encrypted phone, or the surveillance equipment hidden in her car. She grabbed a bottle of top-shelf bourbon and hurled it at the nearest window. Glass exploded outward as the bottle crashed through, triggering the bar's alarm system. The piercing wail filled the space as Emma vaulted over the bar, using the momentary distraction. Tom dove out of her way as she grabbed her emergency bag from its hiding spot. Chun's men reacted with professional speed, spreading out to cut off her exits. "Don't do this," Chun shouted over the alarm. "We're on the same side." Emma didn't believe him. She'd been in this business long enough to know that people claiming to be allies were sometimes the most dangerous enemies. She kicked open the door to the storage room, knowing it had a rear exit into the alley. Derek was already moving to intercept, his combat training evident in his fluid movements. They collided in the doorway, and this time Emma didn't hold back. She struck with the precision of 8 years of special operations training, targeting pressure points and joints with brutal efficiency. Derek was good, his Marine training solid, but Emma had learned from the best operators in the world. She swept his legs, drove her elbow into his clavicle, and left him gasping on the floor. The alley door burst open under her shoulder, and she emerged into the cool night air. Her car was parked 2 blocks away, but she would never make it before they caught up. Instead, she ran toward the crowded main street, where witnesses and cameras would provide some protection. Footsteps pounded behind her. Chun's voice called out, "Stop, or I will shoot." Emma ducked into a narrow passage between buildings, her heart hammering. This was all wrong. Real NCIS agents didn't threaten to shoot someone for running, not like this. They didn't conduct operations this sloppy. Either Chun was dirty, or he wasn't NCIS at all. She emerged onto a side street and nearly collided with a black SUV that screeched to a halt in front of her. The rear door flew open, and a familiar voice commanded, "Get in now." Captain James Monroe, her direct tactical liaison, sat in the back seat, his face grim. Emma hesitated only a second before diving into the vehicle. The SUV accelerated before she even got the door closed. "What the hell happened in there?" Monroe demanded. "Your panic signal activated, and then we lost your tracker. The operation is burned," Emma panted, checking behind them. "No pursuit yet. There's an NCIS agent, or someone claiming to be one, working with the Marines I confronted. They knew I was surveillance, James. They were waiting for someone like me." Monroe's expression darkened. "NCIS has no authorized operation in that sector. We checked. Then they're dirty, or they're not really NCIS, Emma said. Either way, we have a major problem. They mentioned a shipment tonight." Monroe pulled out his phone and made a rapid call. "Colonel Dawson needs to hear this directly. We're taking you to the safe house." As they drove through the night, Emma watched the city lights blur past. Somewhere behind them, Derek, Ann, and Lawrence Chun were regrouping, trying to figure out who she really was and how much damage she had done to their operation. But Emma had questions of her own. How had they identified her? Who had tipped them off? And most importantly, how deep did this conspiracy go? The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place that blends into the background. Colonel Patricia Dawson was already there when they arrived, her silver hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. "Report," she ordered before Emma had fully entered. Emma laid out everything that had happened, from Derek's initial confrontation to Chun's appearance and the escape. Dawson listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "This confirms our worst fears," Dawson said when Emma finished. "We have a leak, possibly at a very high level. The trafficking network has been one step ahead of us for months. Now we know why." "What do we do?" Monroe asked. Dawson looked at Emma with the calculating gaze of a career officer weighing options. "We use this. Emma, your cover at the bar is blown, but they still don't know your real identity or your unit. They think you might be NCIS, FBI, maybe DI. We can work with that uncertainty." "You want me to go back in?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. "Not into the bar. But we need you to make contact with Chun, find out who he really works for. If he's dirty NCIS, we need proof. If he's something else, we need to know what." Emma felt the weight of what was being asked. Going back meant exposing herself to people who had already proven they were willing to use violence. But it also meant a chance to break open a case that had already cost lives and threatened to cost many more. "When?" Emma asked. "Tomorrow night. The shipment Chun mentioned. We'll set up surveillance, and you'll be our ace in the hole." As Emma settled into the safe house for what would be a restless few hours of sleep, she couldn't shake the image of Derek's cold eyes and Chun's calculating smile. Tomorrow would bring answers, but it would also bring danger, unlike anything she had faced in her years of service. The game had changed, and the stakes had just gotten deadly. The warehouse district along the San Diego waterfront fell silent after midnight. Legitimate businesses were closed, and the shadows belonged to those who preferred darkness for their dealings. Emma Cole sat in the passenger seat of an unmarked surveillance van, a tactical vest under her leather jacket. She checked her weapon for the third time, a ritual of focus. Captain Monroe sat in the driver's seat, his eyes glued to multiple screens, showing feeds from cameras positioned around Warehouse 47. Intelligence suggested a major arms shipment was arriving tonight. "You don't have to do this," Monroe said quietly, repeating a concern he'd voiced earlier. Emma met his gaze. "Yes, I do. Those weapons will end up killing people, maybe even our own soldiers. If I can stop that, I have to try." Their earpieces crackled. It was Colonel Dawson. "All units in position. Emma, remember, Your objective is to identify the players and gather evidence. We need to know who is facilitating these shipments from inside our own military structure. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Understood, Emma replied, though they all knew plans rarely survived first contact with reality. Her mind drifted back to what brought her here. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, she had watched her older brother deploy to Iraq. She was just 17 when they handed her the folded flag at his funeral. That loss could have broken her, but instead, it forged something unbreakable inside. On her 18th birthday, she enlisted, determined to honor his sacrifice by becoming the kind of soldier who protected others. The years that followed were grueling. Basic training, advanced training, and then the brutal selection process for special operations that broke most candidates. But Emma pushed through every obstacle, driven by a promise she made at her brother's grave, that his death would mean something, that she would make a difference. She served in places whose names she could never speak, did things that haunted her dreams, but she also saved lives and stopped threats the public would never know existed. Now, sitting in this van, preparing to confront corruption within the very military she had dedicated her life to, Emma felt the weight of all those years. This was different from fighting foreign enemies. This was betrayal from within, by people who had taken the same oath she had and twisted it for profit. "Vehicle approaching," Monroe announced, pulling Emma from her thoughts. On the screen, a black truck rolled toward the warehouse, its headlights cutting through the fog. Emma's pulse quickened as Derek and emerged from the warehouse to meet it. 2 other men followed, both carrying themselves with military bearing. Then the truck's driver stepped out, and Emma's breath caught. It was Vincent Russo, the dock supervisor she'd been watching. "We've got positive ID on Russo," she reported. "He's directly involved." "Copy that," Dawson replied. "Keep watching." The warehouse doors opened wider. More figures emerged, 8 in total, all armed, moving with tactical precision. Then Lawrence Chun appeared. Emma's jaw tightened. He spoke briefly with Derek and Russo before gesturing toward the truck. "They're unloading," Monroe said, stating the obvious as they began moving military-grade weapons containers. Suddenly, a different voice crackled on the radio, one that made Emma's stomach drop. "All units stand down. This is Deputy Director Foster, NCIS. We have operational authority here. Repeat, all units stand down." "What?" Monroe looked at Emma, confused. "Who authorized NCIS jurisdiction?" Colonel Dawson's voice came back, tight with anger. "Deputy Director Foster, this is Colonel Patricia Dawson, Defense Intelligence. We were not informed of any NCIS operation in this sector." "That's because it's classified, Colonel," Foster replied smoothly. "Agent Chun is operating under deep cover. Your operative's interference nearly compromised months of work. Pull your people back now." Emma and Monroe exchanged a look. Something was wrong. "Request verification of authority," Dawson said, her voice like steel. "Foster, provide authentication codes." There was a pause. Foster's voice returned, harder now. "Colonel, you're out of line." "I don't answer to you." "Then you answer to no one legitimate," Dawson shot back. "All units, execute contingency plan Bravo. Emma, your weapons free if threatened. Monroe, get her out of there if this goes wrong." Emma's instincts screamed. If Foster was real NCI, they'd just bungled a federal operation. If he wasn't, they had just exposed themselves to the enemy. Either way, the situation was about to explode. As if on cue, Sheen's head snapped toward their position. He pulled out a phone, spoke briefly, then pointed directly at their van. "We're compromised," Monroe said, starting the engine. "Emma, we need to go." But Emma was watching the screens. Derek and 4 others were moving toward them, weapons drawn. "They're going to kill everyone here to protect their operation. We can't just leave." "Emma, that's an order," Dawson said through the earpiece. "Extraction now." In that moment, Emma made a choice. She ripped out her earpiece, grabbed her weapon, and kicked open the van door. "I'm not leaving those dock workers to die. They're just doing their jobs." She heard Monroe shouting behind her, but she was already moving, using the fog and containers for cover as she circled toward the warehouse. She'd counted 3 civilian workers helping unload, men who had no idea they were handling stolen military weapons, men who had become convenient casualties. Emma reached a side entrance just as gunfire erupted from the direction of the van. Her heart lurched, but she forced herself to focus. Monroe was a trained operator. He could handle himself. The civilians could not. She slipped inside. The 3 workers stood frozen near the truck, eyes wide with fear as Sean barked orders at them. Russo had drawn a weapon, confirming he was far more than a simple supervisor. Moving through the shadows, Emma relied on her training. She'd been in worse situations, outnumbered in hostile territory with no backup. "NCI, everybody freeze!" She shouted, gambling that the workers would respond to authority while the conspirators would hesitate, unsure if she was bluffing. The workers dropped to the floor immediately. Chun spun toward her voice, his weapon tracking. "You just made a fatal mistake," he called out. "There's no walking away from this." "You're right about that," Emma replied, her voice carrying across the warehouse. "But not the way you think. This warehouse is surrounded. Real NCIS agents, real military police. Your operation is over. It was a bluff, a calculated one." She needed to buy time for Monroe to call in real backup. Derek's voice came from behind a stack of crates. "She's alone. I can see the van from here." One operator, trying to play hero. Emma's mind raced. He was right. She was alone against at least 8 armed hostiles. But she had something they didn't. She had nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for. "Those workers are leaving," Emma said firmly. "This is between us. Let them go." Chun laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You think you're in a position to negotiate? You're one person against my entire team." "I'm not walking away from my oath," Emma said. "Not from my duty. Not from what's right." She thought of her brother, of the flag on her dresser, of every soldier she'd served with, who had given everything for an ideal bigger than themselves. This was what it all meant, standing up when it mattered most. Suddenly, the main warehouse doors burst open. Emma's heart soared as tactical teams flooded in, shouting commands to drop weapons. Colonel Dawson herself led the charge, her face grim with determination. Chun and his men hesitated, then slowly lowered their weapons. Derek looked at Emma with something that might have been respect before kneeling to be cuffed. As the arrests proceeded, Colonel Dawson approached Emma. That was incredibly reckless and against direct orders. "Yes, ma'am," Emma said, meeting her commander's stern gaze. Dawson's expression softened. It was also brave, and exactly what a soldier should do when innocent lives are at stake. "We'll discuss the order violation later. For now, well done, Captain Cole." The truth unraveled in the hours that followed. Lawrence Chun was a rogue ex-agent, using his knowledge to run a weapons trafficking ring. Derek Ein and other Marines had been recruited with money and misguided loyalty. Deputy Director Foster didn't exist. The whole setup was built on lies. As dawn broke, Emma sat in the debriefing room, exhausted but satisfied. The weapons were recovered, the traffickers arrested, and the workers were safe. Colonel Dawson entered with 2 cups of coffee. "You know what happens now. Commendations, probably a promotion. Your actions tonight saved lives and exposed corruption at multiple levels." Emma sipped the coffee. "I just did my job, ma'am." "No," Dawson said firmly. "You did far more than your job. You stood up when you could have stood down. You risked everything for people you didn't even know. That's not just duty. That's character." Later, driving to her real apartment for the first time in weeks, Emma thought about strength. Real strength wasn't just physical skill. It was the courage to stand alone, to face overwhelming odds for something bigger than yourself, to keep your oath even when others broke theirs. She parked and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was bruised and exhausted, but her eyes held a quiet pride. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mom about family dinner. Emma smiled. This was what she fought for. The ordinary moments, the simple joys, the freedom for people to live without fear. Tomorrow, there would be more reports, more meetings, another mission. But tonight, she would sleep knowing her brother would be proud. The soldier who never broke her own principles, no matter the cost. And that made all the difference. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.